Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for SF Doc Fest. The festival is taking place May 29th through June 8th online, virtually in your computer screen, which is how you're joining us today, as well as in person at the Roxy Theater and the Vogue Theater. Welcome to our amazing filmmakers for our Short Stories 3 program. Thank you so much for being here with us today. I'm Sarah Marie Flores. I program all the shorts here at SF Doc Fest. Woohoo! So I'm just gonna kind of jump in and ask our filmmakers to introduce themselves and tell us the film that they're here with and what the genesis of the project was for them. How did they find the story and why did we get to experience it? And I'm gonna jump in and ask Herod to please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Harrod Blank, and I'm with the film Salvation Mountain, Leonard Knight. And I first came upon Leonard Knight and Salvation Mountain way back when I was doing, I believe it was after Wild Wheels, the documentary on art cars, and Automorphosis. So actually, that's right. Leonard was in Automorphosis. So it must have been Wild Wheels. I was on my way back and forth across the country, came upon it. I was like, wow, I didn't know this guy would have art cars. And I met him and started filming on Super 16 with my father, Les Blank. And then I would just, every time I crossed the country, I'd stop in and see him. And he was, he was just really a cool guy to hang out with. I'm not really big into the religion thing. Like I'm not into it at all, actually. But it wasn't about that. It was more about his character and his belief and his perseverance in painting this mountain in the middle of nowhere. Um, and I thought there was something really beautiful about that, and also that he didn't need what most people think they need to be happy in life. And I thought that was really interesting too, that he found his own happiness and it worked for him. And there's nothing you can take away from that. If it works for him, great. He's doing something beautiful for others to enjoy. So for me, it was a win-win. But that's how I first came across him. And then I actually showed, this was a cool screening. I showed Automorphosis on the camera van monitors. The camera van was a van covered with cameras at Salvation Mountain premiere for Leonard in person. And we had like, I don't know, 20 people in chairs. And we watched the movie on the camera van monitors. That was really cool. So yeah, that's about the introduction there for Leonard.
That's so special. Thank you so much. Hi, Justine. Please tell us all the things.
Hi, my name is Justine Hagan. I'm here today with a film called Mercedes, a short that I directed. Um, Years ago, I directed a feature called Typeface that really kind of explored the value of analog technology in our digital age. And Mercedes, as you've seen, is partially about typewriting. And I was having lunch with a friend who, his company, he was making these kind of beautiful bespoke invitations and was talking about how he was having trouble finding people who liked to type on typewriters, and it was really a problem for him. And a lot of the young people that he was working with weren't patient enough for the machines. And so then the next time I saw him, he said he had found an answer to his prayers, and her name was Mercedes. And he told me a little bit about her biography, and I thought that she sounded like someone I wanted to get to know. So we spent a day with her in her life, and 6 years later, it became a movie.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. And hi, Mimi. Welcome.
Hi, thank you so much. So my name is Mimi. I'm the director and editor of Bad Hostage. And this film came about because it was a story that I had heard for my entire life from my mom. So I grew up hearing this amazing story about my grandmother and this incredible night of heroism. And, things in family mythology can get a little inflated, right? So over the years, I kind of started to wonder if this was even a true story, if it had all really happened that way. And I started to get really curious about it. And so I went online and I started looking up newspapers, and I found that not only was this a true story, it really happened just the way my mom had always told me. And it was kind of more incredible than I had even realized. And so from there, I found archival footage, and the first thing I did really was sit down and do an interview with my grandmother. And I thought she was so incredible, and she told the story in such an amazing way that I really wanted to capture it more deeply. So that kind of set me on this whole journey.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Harriet, to jump back over to Salvation Mountain, I mean, I think one of the most interesting things about this monument existing is kind of its location, right? Like Slab City is known to be like a lawless enclave. I think I was like reading about it before me and my friend decided to like drive through Palm Springs and go visit it. We're like, do we need to be worried about being within this space? And then when you arrive, it's just the most beautiful, charming place filled with people that are just like taking in this gloriousness. What was it like for you when you first found the location, and like how did you approach wanting to make it into a film?
Well, it's kind of in the middle of nowhere, and so it's sort of like this appears out of a vacuum. And it wasn't just Leonard that was interesting. It was a lot of different characters. These snowbirds come down from Canada and north of the U.S. and they spend the winter there, and they can live off grid. And then that's Slab City, but they're all tied to Leonard because they visit with Leonard. They might take him out to dinner, and some of them don't. Some of them are actually not into that. And then there's another place right next door called East Jesus, and East Jesus was an environment created by a friend of mine, and it was sort of like this environment as well, with art cars and original art, and it's really cool. Have you been to East Jesus? Yeah, okay. So anyways, there's three places, and there's Bombay Beach is not far away either, and that's really interesting, sort of like a ghost town right on the edge of the Salton Sea. But it was kind of renegades and people shooting guns, and a lot of people doing drugs at Slab City. They had these really weird parties late at night. I can't remember the name of that venue, but it was right next door to Salvation Mountain. So there's all this wild, rebellious activity. And there was actually a guy who was he was a recycler, and he would run out into where they were dropping bombs, the military was testing bombs, and he would run out and get the casings and come back and then recycle them. And I want to do a movie about that guy because I thought that was just crazy. But that's the thing, it was off grid, people that made their own way, and Leonard was one of them. And I found it really interesting. So that's pretty much why I gravitated there. I mean, it's got a little bit of the, Burning Man energy, and this Wild West, and no rules, and you have to make do. And so all that stuff makes for creative backdrop.
Yeah, I love it. I feel like there's definitely a kinship, I think, especially when we think about what like the Bay Area art scene was prior to kind of like our decimation. Not that it's decimated, there's still a very amazing, vibrant art scene. But we've like evicted Survival Research Laboratory out of the Bay. Obviously Burning Man is what it is now, but it really formed out of this like rebellious spirit that I think is very much so alive and well in this locale. So it's so special. Thank you, Harry.
Mhm.
Justine, talking about like stalwart, like San Francisco oldies and baddies, like talk about Mercedes and just what it was like to kind of collaborate with her and tell this story. Cause I think you really like capture such a great snapshot of what makes the Bay so special.
Thank you. Yeah, I really enjoy portrait films where you get to spend just a little bit of time with someone that you would maybe never meet. And Mercedes, in a lot of ways, some might think of her just as an average office worker, but she's so much more. I think it's fascinating, her talking about why she works in her 70s, why she still goes to work every day. Of course, part of it's financial, but also it's about what it means to her. Um, and hearing her story about kind of coming of age in San Francisco and what it meant to her, both the music and the art and how it's changed. And then, of course, what happens during COVID and the choices that we all made. About where we wanted to live and how we wanted to live. But yeah, it was what you see on screen is very much mirrors the experience I had getting to know her, just kind of humor and bits of joy and perseverance through travails as well, kind of at every turn.
That's so awesome. Thank you so much. And Mimi, I would love to hear more about kind of your approach to the storytelling. I mean, obviously, it comes from a personal family story, and you're telling the story of your grandmother, but you're touching on something that's much larger as well, right? Like when we're talking about kind of the way that the institution of policing can be violent and not have our best interests. I mean, I say this especially speaking in this moment of what's happening, with uh mass instances of police not having humanity in mind, especially with what's happening right now with Rodney Hinton Jr. and the kind of absolution of guilt for cops for murders that happen every day. Like, how was it to expand this story from something that is familiar and personal into these larger issues?
Yeah, thank you. It's a great question. I think, this film took a really long time to make, as so many documentaries do. And one of the things that took so long was figuring out what the story was, outside of just being kind of this wild anecdote in my family, like what else was it about? And it took a long time to find that. But of course, there was a sort of organic tie-in to the Patricia Hearst story, with my grandmother, with this sort of wild anecdote. About the FBI knocking at her door. And so that kind of led me down that path. And I think that, I mean, you've hit the nail on the head, in that like what I found in common in these three stories was the behavior of law enforcement and of the authorities. I think these three stories, my grandmother, Patricia Hearst, and the Christine and Mark in Stockholm, they're all really distinct situations. They're all really separate in so many different ways, and they all had really different experiences. But this is what you really see in common with the three of them, is they all really, fail to perform in this damsel in distress role. And they all find that their situations become more dangerous for them when the police get involved. And I think, one of my favorite lines in the film, and something that has, just affects my worldview in a big way, is my mom actually gives the line. She says, the police weren't there to help. They were there to win, right? They were trying to win. And I see that all the time, both in instances of police violence and also, in global politics and in interpersonal relationships. I see that everywhere, just the danger in focusing on victory over solution. And so I think that that's a really important idea. And that was something that I saw was so dangerous for all of these women in all of these situations, is that they were kind of at the mercy of these authority figures with weapons who were trying to score a win, and like beat the bad guy instead of to keep them safe. So that's something that has really stuck with me, and definitely an idea that I hope comes through in the film.
It certainly does. Thank you so much. Lovely. Well, Herod, jumping back over to you, I would love to have you talk a little bit about like your visual approach to capturing this. Obviously, growing up the way that you did, you had a great teacher, but like, how did you approach making this film for yourself and like capturing kind of the glory of Salvation Mountain?
Well, I really try to capture the essence of who Leonard is, and try to be obedient to his character and his humanity. And that's why I really like to get in close with the camera. And I really just follow a person around. Like there's footage in that I did shoot that didn't make it in the movie, but I went hot tubbing with him in a little lagoon. Whatever he did, I did. We would eat together. I slept there on site. I had the camera van there a couple times, or I just lay on the ground and sleep, not too far from him. He would sleep generally in his truck, but there'd be bonfires at night and just hanging out. And the one thing I was really trying to get after is, what was it that made him say the sinner's prayer in the first place? What did he do that brought that on? And I asked that question to him, and I just couldn't get anywhere with it. So he just kind of indicated that he one day, for some reason, he said that the sinner's prayer, and then he changed his life, and then he had the vision of making a hot air balloon, and then crash landed and basically crash landed there, and then decided to make the mountain because he couldn't make the balloon. But I wanted to know, why did you want to make the balloon in the first place? Like, what had happened to him that made him want to do that? And I never could get the answer. But I just wanted to capture his humanity and look at that way of life from his perspective, and not pass my own judgments on it, but just try to see what it was for him. And I mean, I did my best. I think that there's a lot of things that were in his head during the day that I couldn't get to. I don't, his process. I don't. We can see him painting and stuff, but there's the motivation that drove this man to do this for 30 plus years, every day, all day long, is pretty tremendous motivation. So, but yeah, I like shooting on Super 16. There's a little bit of video that I shot in there as well, because I kept going back. This was started in 1995, and then I just kept after it. And I think I filmed him maybe 2012, which was shortly before he died. And now it's still there. It's still happening. And there's a nonprofit that takes care of it, which I find interesting. And obviously, I've been inspired too, because I'm making a world environment right now in Douglas, Arizona, where I'm at. And I've kind of spent my life focused on world environments, and I really think they're a form of public art, and they become destinations for people. And I wanted to build something like that, and I'm gonna keep doing it until I die. And so I can relate to that unknowing passion for doing something, and I'm pretty driven. I'm just not driven by the religious thing.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. Justine, tell us a little bit more about like how you approached working with Mercedes. Like, what was that collaboration like? And how did that kind of inform your visual storytelling?
Absolutely. I'm a producer by day, is typically my day job. And so I direct pretty rarely, and it's usually stories that I feel like no one else is going to tell. And both this and Typeface, the film I mentioned earlier, started with a couple of friends and myself and some gear, and so this, I reached out to Mercedes ahead of time. We had a few phone calls just to see if she was game, and really the idea was, that it was going to be done on a micro budget, and really thinking if we spent just a day with her shooting, yeah, what we could get. So really trying to be inobtrusive, and no sit down interviews, but really just talking to her why she worked, allowing her to keep, practicing her work and doing her job while we spoke. And I really wanted to capture kind of the environment she was in, and the aesthetics of it, and also, again, the tactility of it. I wanted that to come across. And we had a big debate if we should actually leave the building with her, or if the whole film should be shot in that one room. And we did decide part of her job was going to the post office, so we did decide to go with her on that journey, and because and then when we put archival in the film again, it became kind of this larger reflection about San Francisco, about her, her life, and then kind of San Francisco as a larger environment. So we shot with her that day, and then we just stayed in touch over the years. We shot it in 2019, and then as I stayed in touch with her when she moved back to Denver, I really felt like the film needed an epilogue. And again, we thought about, do we do it over Zoom? But wanted those aesthetics to be contained within the office. And so just did it as a phone call. And I also, in choosing to have showing the kind of iPhone iconography, wanted also the contrast, kind of to make you think about both the technology she was using in her role, but then also just the reality of where we live now, and having the iPhone represent that. So yeah, and then she's seen the film and loved it, which was very gratifying, and it was really meaningful to her also to have her brother's artwork on the big screen, and then also the dedication to her grandpa at the end. And I also just want to mention on a personal note, one of our producers on the film, Bianca Beiruti, who's a beloved San Francisco filmmaker who passed away last year. It was really, meaningful to finish it and include, think of her throughout the process, and the dedication at the end as well was meaningful for all of us. So that's a little bit about that.
Yeah. We love Bianca. Miss her very much. She was so special and integral to the Bay Area community. So thank you for that shout out. Yay, Bianca. Okay. Mimi, to jump over to you, could you just talk about your process in working with archival work? And obviously, the interviews that you do are so lovely and charming, but I think having this factual thread through the use of archival really helps to bring the story together. So how was that research? How did the integration into the film play out for you?
Yeah, so I have to give a huge shout out to our producer, Max Asaf here, because he did a huge amount of archival research. And so that was definitely a really big part of the process, because actually, shooting the interviews didn't take very long. Doing the archival research took a very long time. And so that was a really, really extended process, trying to find all that material. And initially it was really trying to figure out if this idea made sense, what was there in the archive, what was the material that that we could find, and how would that kind of exist in communication with my grandmother's story. So it was a really great process. I work primarily as an editor, and I really love working with archive. I love thinking about how archive can be used as verite, and how it feels in communication with contemporary footage. So it was a really rich experience for me as an editor, getting into those stories in the archive and trying to find those links between the three. And then I think it was a really exciting challenge for Max as well, because we were also drawing from so many different sources. And when I first began the film, was doing it on my own, it was just kind of the newspapers, and then the archive of my grandmother's story. But then when Max got on board, and it was really looking at, not only news coverage, but also, some of the pop culture elements, and, figuring out where we were going to bring that in, and where we were going to draw those from. I think it was a really rewarding creative experience for both of us in different ways.
Oh, I love how sticky archival can be, if that makes sense. It kind of just helps bind everything together in such a special way, and it's definitely you're an archaeologist, uncovering all of these artifacts. So it's really lovely, and it's used so effectively in your film. So thank you for sharing. And that's all the time that we have today. A huge thank you to our filmmakers for joining us. Even huger thank you to our audience for showing up and sharing these stories. We couldn't do this without you. So thank you for your money and attention and support of amazing films like these. Thank you everyone so much. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.